5-year-old Zion didn't care about the armed guards or the expensive office. He was focused on the tall man behind the desk who had been arguing with his mother for the last 2 minutes. Luca Moretti pointed a sharp finger at Valentina, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl that made the guards in the room stiffen. "I already gave you my answer," Luca said. "I am not paying a single cent for child support. Take your lies and get out of my office before I lose my patience." Zion stepped forward with quiet confidence. He stopped between the two adults, smoothed his small t-shirt, and looked up at the Mafia Boss with a face that was far too serious for a child. "Excuse me, sir," Zion said, his voice as calm as a classroom teacher. "Before you finish shouting, can I ask a question?" Luca Moretti frowned. No one interrupted him, especially not a child. "What is it?" he said coldly. "My name is Zion," the boy replied. "But you can call me Zion the scientist." He turned his gaze toward the computer screen on Luca's desk. It was filled with complex investment charts and zigzagging red and green lines. Luca was about to click a button to move millions of dollars minutes before they walked in. "If you don't want to lose your money, you should not go ahead with that investment," Zion said. Luca narrowed his eyes. "What did you just say, kid?" Zion pointed a small finger at a sharp red dip on the graph. "The pattern shows a high risk of loss. The numbers are falling faster than the recovery rate. It is not logical to put money there right now." The air left the room. Luca had spent all morning analyzing that chart, but the 5-year-old had spotted the flaw in 10 seconds. But Zion didn't stop there. He immediately turned back to Luca, his expression unchanging. "Now back to our first problem," Zion said. "Scientists do not make decisions without proof. You decided I am not your son, but you have not tested that hypothesis. My mama says you are a leader, but leaders gather data before they reach a conclusion. Right now, you are reacting emotionally to my mama, just like you almost reacted emotionally to that bad investment." The room fell silent. Even the guards held their breath. Luca's face tightened as he looked from the screen to the boy. For the first time in his life, the powerful Mafia Boss had no answer. He looked into Zion's eyes, and realized the boy wasn't just talking. He was analyzing him. The silence in the office was heavy. Luca Moretti stared at the boy. He felt a strange feeling in his chest. For years, powerful men had trembled when Luca spoke. Men twice his size had begged him for mercy. But this small child was different. "You think you're smart, don't you?" Luca finally asked. His voice was no longer a shout. It was a low, curious murmur. Zion tilted his head. "You asked me a question," the boy said calmly. "People only ask questions when they want answers." Valentina stepped forward. Her hand rested on Zion's shoulder. "He isn't trying to be rude, Luca. He just sees the world differently." Luca narrowed his eyes at Valentina. The truth is that women come to me every day with stories. They all want a piece of the Moretti riches. Why should I believe you are any different?" "Because we can check," Zion interrupted. He looked around the room, then back at Luca. "In my books, when something is not clear, we do a test. Then we know the answer for sure." Before Luca could respond, the office door swung open. An older man walked in with authority. His silver hair was neatly combed back. He stood very straight, and the guards in the room immediately became stiff and alert. "Father," Luca said quietly. William Moretti's sharp eyes moved from Luca to Valentina, then to Zion. He frowned. "What are a woman and a child doing in your office?" William asked. His voice was calm but heavy. Luca exhaled slowly. "She says the boy is mine." William's eyes turned cold. "Says." He looked at Valentina. "No one lies their way into this family. That has never happened." Valentina's jaw tightened. "I am not trying to lie. I only want him to support his son." William ignored her and spoke to Luca. "In my day, I never let my feelings get in the way of my brain. You must be smarter than this." Zion watched the older man carefully. His small eyes studied every move William made. William continued, "Get a DNA test. If the boy is a Moretti, pay the mother and send her away." Valentina's face changed instantly. Anger flashed in her eyes. Her hand tightened on Zion's shoulder. Luca's expression darkened. "He is not a business deal, father." William looked at him sharply. "Everything is a business decision, Luca. That is why this family survives." Zion stepped forward. He looked up at William. "You speak like numbers," Zion said calmly. The room froze. William looked down at him. "Excuse me. You try to remove things you don't like," Zion continued softly. "But people are not numbers. If I am a Moretti, then my mother is part of the story. You cannot delete her and expect the answer to stay correct. My mama is my life. You cannot send her away and expect me to remain here." The guard Marco let his mouth drop open. Even Luca looked surprised. William studied the boy carefully. "You talk very boldly for a child." For the first time, William Moretti did not have a comeback. Luca stepped forward. "I am not a piece of wood you can shape, father. If he is mine, I decide what happens next." William's eyes narrowed. "You forget who built this empire." "And you forget," Luca replied calmly, "that you built it so I could lead, not obey." Silence fell again. William turned toward the door. "Do the DNA test. Then we will see if this child truly belongs to this family." He paused at the door. "If he is a Moretti, then he will change everything." The door closed. "Marco," Luca said, his voice cold and sharp. "Call the private clinic. Tell them we are coming right now." He turned toward the window. "And Marco, make sure the doctor understands. If these results are leaked to anyone, he won't live to see tomorrow." The hallway of the clinic was long and quiet. Valentina sat on a hard plastic chair, her fingers twisting the strap of her purse over and over. Inside the office, the doctor was getting the medical tools ready to collect their DNA samples. She looked at Luca. He stood by the window in his expensive suit. He looked like he didn't belong in this plain white room. 5 years ago, they had met at a fancy party where she was a server. He was powerful and cold, but for one night, he had been kind. Valentina had ran away before the sun came up, hoping to keep her life simple. Now her world was crashing into his. 5 years, Valentina, Luca said. His voice was a low whisper, but it carried the weight of a storm. "Why?" Valentina didn't look up. She kept her eyes on Zion's small hands. "You know why, Luca? Your world isn't a place for a child. It's barely a place for a person." Luca took a step forward. He was close enough that Valentina could smell his expensive cologne mixed with a faint scent of rain. "You took that choice away from me. You saw me that night at the gala. You knew who I was, yet you chose to run." "I ran because I knew who you were," Valentina snapped back. She finally looked at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You were the man everyone feared. You were the man who said he had no room for love or family. What was I supposed to do? Call you and tell you I was carrying a mistake?" Luca's jaw tightened. "I don't make mistakes. I make decisions." "Zion is not a decision," Valentina said firmly. "He is a person. He has dreams. He likes to read about space and he hates broccoli. He is more than just a name on a DNA report." Her heart beat fast against her ribs. What if he hates Zion? She wondered. Or worse, what if he tries to take him away? "You're shaking," Luca said. He noticed every little thing. "It's a big day, Luca," Valentina replied, her voice trembling. "To you this is just a test. To me this is my son's whole life." "I told you, Valentina. I don't pay for mistakes. If he isn't mine, I walk away. If he is." He stopped talking, leaving the sentence unfinished. Zion sat between them. He wasn't playing with a toy. Instead, he was staring at the clock on the wall and then at the hospital entrance. He was counting on his fingers. "Mom," Zion said softly. Valentina leaned down and brushed his hair from his forehead. "Yes, honey. Every 10 minutes, a new sick person comes through those doors," Zion observed. He didn't look sad, he looked curious. "Mom, did you notice the emergency unit is already full? Most of the people are being told to go to a different hospital." Luca stared at the boy. He wasn't expecting a 5-year-old to track hospital traffic. "How long have you been counting?" Luca asked, his interest piqued. "Since we sat down," Zion said seriously. "I think I need to carry out a research project on the number of patients that walk in here every 10 minutes. That is what scientists do. They find patterns." Luca looked at the boy with a strange expression. It wasn't just a child's game. The boy was analyzing the efficiency of the building. He watched the world exactly like a Moretti, looking for the logic in the chaos. Valentina felt a lump in her throat. She saw the way Luca was looking at Zion. It wasn't anger anymore. It was recognition. That scared her more than his silence. She wanted to grab Zion and run back to their tiny apartment where life was safe. "The doctor is ready," a nurse said, stepping into the hallway. Valentina stood up. Her legs felt heavy like lead. She looked at the wooden door of the office. Behind that door was the answer that would change everything. Luca stepped forward and put his hand on the door handle. His face looked like it was carved from stone. "Wait," Valentina whispered. She reached out to touch his arm. "Once we do this, there is no going back. Are you sure you're ready?" Luca didn't blink. He turned the handle and pushed the door open. The office was silent. The doctor sat behind the desk, flipping through papers, but no one paid attention to him. Luca didn't look at the desk. His eyes were fixed on Zion. "Sit down, please," the doctor said gently. Valentina pulled Zion close to her side. She sat on the edge of the chair. Her muscles were tight. Luca sat across from them, crossing his long legs. "Zion," Luca said. His voice wasn't harsh, but it was firm. "Why are you looking at my watch?" Zion looked up from Luca's wrist. "The second hand stopped for a moment," the boy said quietly. Luca glanced at his watch. "It's expensive. It doesn't stop." Zion shrugged slightly. "It did. Maybe it's tired." Luca studied him. It was a simple comment, but the boy had noticed something small that most people ignored. "He likes noticing things," Valentina said quickly. She squeezed Zion's hand. "He watches people and objects. It's just how he is." "That isn't normal for a child," Luca murmured. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Who taught you that?" "Nobody," Zion replied. "I just look." Valentina watched Luca carefully. The coldness in his face was still there, but curiosity was growing. That worried her more than anger. "Is this why you're here?" Valentina asked softly. "To study him." Luca's eyes moved to her. "I am trying to understand him." "He is my son," Valentina said firmly. "He is a child, Luca, not a project." Luca didn't answer. He reached out slowly, as if he wanted to touch Zion's shoulder, but Valentina moved Zion closer to her. Luca stopped and pulled his hand back. The doctor cleared his throat and stood up. "We will proceed with the sample collection now," he said. A nurse entered the room with a tray. Zion watched carefully as the doctor prepared the tools. "It will only take a moment," the doctor said. Valentina held Zion's hand as the sample was taken. Luca stood still, his expression unreadable as his own sample was collected. The room was quiet again once it was done. "You can wait outside while we process the results," the doctor said. Luca stood up first. "Let's go." They stepped into the hallway. The lights were bright. The air smelled of disinfectant. Zion walked quietly between them. His eyes moved from one wall to another. After a few steps, Zion looked up at his mother. "Mom," he said softly. "Yes," Valentina replied. "When I grow up, I want to be a neurologist." Valentina blinked, surprised. A neurologist? Zion nodded. They study the brain. That is where decisions come from. Luca glanced down at him, a faint curiosity in his eyes. I thought you were a scientist, Luca said. Zion looked up at him calmly. I am. Then how do you plan to become a doctor? Luca asked. Zion shrugged slightly. Being a scientist does not stop me from becoming a doctor. It helps. Luca went quiet. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about the test. He was thinking about the child beside him. Luca looked at the boy. A flicker of something human appeared in his cold eyes. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a heavy silver coin. He flipped it toward Zion. The boy caught it with one hand. Keep it, Luca said. It's for luck. Zion looked at the coin. Luck is just a word for math we don't understand yet. But thank you. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. Luca's patience was running thin. He was a man who moved the world with a single word. He did not sit in plastic chairs waiting for nurses. He stood up and adjusted his cuffs. The soft light of the hallway caught the sharp edges of his jaw. He looked at a tall man standing by the elevators. The man wore a dark suit and an earpiece. This was Luca's lead guard. Marco, Luca called out. The guard moved instantly. He stood at attention in front of Luca. Tell the doctor I am done waiting, Luca commanded. His voice was cold and steady. Tell him to send the official results to my residence immediately. He has 1 hour to get them there. Valentina's eyes widened. She stood up, pulling Zion closer to her side. Luca, what are you doing? We are already here. We should just wait for the folder. Luca turned his gaze toward her. The hospital is too open. There are too many windows. Too many strangers. He looked down at Zion, who was watching him with deep, curious eyes. If this boy is who you say he is, he doesn't belong in a waiting room. I have a home, Luca, Valentina said, her voice rising with worry. We can go back to our apartment and wait for a phone call. No, Luca said. It wasn't a suggestion. It was an order. You are coming with me. My car is outside. Valentina felt a wave of fear. I didn't agree to go to your house. I only agreed to the test. Luca stepped closer. His presence was overwhelming. The world is about to change for both of you. You can either be safe behind my walls or you can be alone in the streets. Choose now. Valentina looked at Zion. The boy looked back at her calmly. He reached into his pocket and touched the silver coin Luca had given him. The car has tinted glass, Mom, Zion whispered. Nobody can see in. It's safer than the bus. Luca raised an eyebrow. He looked at the boy with a hint of a smile. Listen to your son, Valentina. He is smarter than you think. Valentina felt trapped. She didn't trust Luca, but she knew his power. If she refused, he would likely force them anyway. She nodded slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs. Fine, she said softly. But we are just waiting for the results. Nothing more. We will see, Luca replied. He led them toward the private exit. 2 more guards appeared, forming a circle around them. They walked through the glass doors. A large black SUV was waiting at the curb. The engine was humming like a sleeping beast. As the heavy door clicked shut behind them, Valentina felt the air change. The hospital was gone. The normal world was fading away. Luca looked out the window as the car pulled into traffic. He didn't speak. He was already thinking ahead. Zion sat quietly between them, watching the city move past the tinted glass. For the first time, Valentina realized she had stepped into Luca's world. And there was no easy way back. The black SUV rolled through tall iron gates. A long driveway led to a house that looked more like a castle. It was made of gray stone and surrounded by perfectly green grass. Everything was quiet and expensive. We're here, Luca said. He stepped out of the car before the guard could even open the door. Valentina stepped out slowly. She felt small beneath the high ceilings of the entrance hall. The floors were polished marble. Large paintings hung on the walls. It was a beautiful place, but it felt cold to her. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a fortress. "Marco, prepare the guest wing," Luca told his lead guard. "And tell the kitchen to prepare lunch. Nothing heavy." "Yes, Mr. Moretti," the guard replied and hurried away. Valentina turned to Luca, her jaw set. "We won't be staying long enough for a guest wing, Luca. Once that message arrives, we are leaving." Luca didn't argue. He just watched Zion walk toward a large bookshelf in the corner of the room. The boy wasn't intimidated by the wealth. He was looking at the titles of the books. Suddenly, Valentina's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out. Her eyes widened as she read the text message. "Oh, Zion," she whispered. Her face softened for a moment, her worry replaced by pride. "What is it?" Luca asked. He was standing closer than she realized. "It's a message from Zion's school," Valentina said. She looked at her son. "Zion, you were selected for the National Spelling Bee. It will be broadcast on television." Zion turned around, a small smile on his face. "I told you the word phenomenon wouldn't trip me up, Mom." Valentina read further. "The invitation says parents are encouraged to attend. It's held at the Grand Auditorium downtown." Luca's eyes narrowed. "A public event. On television." "Yes," Valentina said softly. "He worked hard for this. I have to be there." Luca walked over to the window, looking out at his guards. Being in a crowded auditorium with cameras was dangerous for a man like him. But he glanced at Zion again. The boy was calmly scanning the bookshelf. "You should come too," Zion said quietly. Luca turned. "Why would I do that?" "Because you said you wanted to understand me," Zion replied. "This is how I think." Luca stayed silent. He was thinking about the risk. He was also thinking about the possibility that this boy might be his. "I will think about it," Luca said finally. Valentina slipped her phone back into her pocket. The room grew quiet again. Somewhere in the house, footsteps echoed softly. The invitation had changed the mood. And for the first time, Luca wondered what it would feel like to sit in the audience, not as a feared man but as a father. The grand auditorium was filled with the hum of hundreds of people. Bright lights hung from the ceiling, making the stage look like a giant island. Cameras moved on long metal arms, ready to broadcast the event to the world. Valentina sat in the third row, her hands locked together in her lap. She felt like she couldn't breathe. To her left, the seat was empty. To her right, a man sat with his hat pulled low and his coat collar turned up. "You should relax," Luca whispered. Even in a crowded room, his voice sounded like an order. "I can't," Valentina replied. "He's so small up there." Luca looked at the stage. Zion sat among 20 other children. He looked calm. He wasn't swinging his legs or looking for his mother. He was watching the judges. Luca felt a strange tightness in his chest. He was used to being the most powerful person in any room, but here he was just a face in a crowd. He hated the lack of control. He hated how close the strangers were sitting. "The next word is for Zion," the head judge announced. Zion stepped forward to the microphone. He looked tiny under the spotlights. "The word is labyrinthine," the judge said. The audience went quiet. Valentina gripped her purse. It was a hard word for a 5-year-old. She looked at Luca. He was leaning forward, his eyes fixed on the boy. "Labyrinthine," Zion repeated clearly. "Labyrinthine. Labyrinthine." "Correct," the judge said. The room erupted in applause. Luca didn't clap, but he exhaled a breath he didn't know he was holding. He looked at the silver coin he was spinning between his fingers, the same kind he had given Zion. "He doesn't even look nervous," Luca murmured. "He doesn't get nervous when he knows he is right," Valentina whispered back. She looked at Luca and saw a spark of pride in his eyes. It wasn't the cold interest of a businessman anymore. It was something deeper. The rounds continued. One by one, children left the stage in tears. Zion remained. He handled words like archipelago and pachyderm without a single mistake. Luca found himself watching Zion's face on the giant television screens above the stage. He realized that millions of people were seeing the boy's face. He shifted slightly in his seat, feeling uneasy in a way he could not explain. Next word, sovereignty, the judge said. Zion paused. For the first time he looked toward the audience. His eyes found Luca's. A silent message passed between them. Sovereignty, Zion began. Sovereignty. Correct. Zion is our winner. The crowd stood up, cheering loudly. Valentina jumped to her feet, tears streaming down her face. Zion stood on the stage, holding a golden trophy that was almost as big as he was. Go to him, Luca said, nudging Valentina toward the stage. Aren't you coming? She asked. Luca glanced at the cameras, then shook his head. I'll watch from here. Go. Valentina ran to the stage and pulled Zion into a hug. On the giant screen, the camera zoomed in on the mother and son. The crowd continued to applaud. At that same moment, in a quiet office across the city, a television played in the background. A man glanced at the screen. His eyes narrowed as the camera briefly captured Luca's face. He leaned closer, studying the image, then looked at Zion holding the trophy. Interesting, the man murmured softly. Back in the auditorium, Luca felt uneasy. He didn't know why, but the feeling wouldn't leave him. He scanned the exits and noticed his guards adjusting their positions. Valentina returned from the stage, Zion holding the trophy proudly. You did well, Luca said quietly. Zion nodded. I spelled carefully. Luca allowed himself a small smile. But the uneasy feeling remained. And for the first time, Luca realized that stepping into the spotlight might have consequences. The walk to the exit was fast. Luca kept his hand on Zion's shoulder, guiding him through the crowd. Valentina followed closely behind. Her heart was still fluttering with pride, but she noticed the change in Luca's energy. He wasn't relaxed. He was scanning the faces of every person they passed. Is something wrong? Valentina whispered as they reached the back alley where the SUV waited. The cameras were everywhere, Luca said shortly. He ushered them into the car. We shouldn't have stayed for the photos. The car ride back to the estate was silent. Zion sat in the middle, his small hands resting on the golden trophy. He looked tired but content. He didn't seem to notice the way Luca kept checking the side mirrors or the way his jaw was set tight. When they arrived back at the fortress, the sun was beginning to set. The gray stone of the house looked dark against the orange sky. Take Zion to the kitchen for a snack, Luca told Valentina. I need to go to my study. Luca, the doctor's message. Valentina reminded him. You said it arrived earlier. I know, Luca replied. He didn't look at her. He walked away, his footsteps echoing on the marble floor. Inside his study, Luca locked the door. He sat behind his heavy oak desk and opened his laptop. His fingers hovered over the keyboard for a second. He was a man who lived by facts, but for the first time in his life, he felt a flicker of uncertainty. He opened the email. He scrolled past the medical jargon and the long strings of numbers. His eyes skipped to the bottom of the page. Probability of paternity. 99.99%. Luca leaned back in his chair. He closed his eyes and let out a long, slow breath. He thought about the boy's calm face under the stage lights. He thought about the way Zion noticed small details others ignored. He wasn't just a smart kid. He was his son. A knock at the door broke his thoughts. It was Marco. The guard looked worried. Sir, Marco said as Luca unlocked the door. A clip from the broadcast is trending. People are asking who the man in the third row is. Some of the comments are from people we don't like. Luca's eyes turned cold. The pride he felt moments ago was replaced by something sharper. For years, He had lived with nothing to lose. Now he had everything. Increase the guard at the gates, Luca ordered. Triple it. No one enters or leaves without my word. He walked out of the study and found Valentina and Zion in the hall. Zion was showing a maid how the trophy base was screwed together. Valentina looked up, searching Luca's face for an answer. Luca didn't speak. He walked straight to Zion and knelt down so they were at eye level. That trophy is heavy, Luca said softly. It's okay, Zion replied. I can hold it. You don't have to hold everything alone anymore, Luca said quietly. He stood and looked at Valentina, his expression firm. He stays here, Luca said. From now on, he is under my protection. Valentina felt her breath catch. She understood what that meant. The test was over, but a new chapter had just begun. The Moretti estate felt different tonight. Usually it was a place of quiet power. Now it was a fortress under siege. Armed guards stood every 10 feet. The air was thick with the feeling of a coming storm. Inside the dining hall, Zion was eating his dinner with the same focus he used for spelling. He had a notebook next to his plate. What are you writing, Zion? Valentina asked. Her voice was thin. She hadn't stopped looking at the blacked-out windows. The guards, Zion said, not looking up. They move in a pattern. Every 6 minutes, there is a 40-second gap where no one is looking at the north garden. It is an inefficient system. Luca, who was sipping wine at the head of the table, froze. He looked at his son. 40 seconds. Yes, Zion said, finally looking up. And the man at the front gate has a slight limp. Slows his reaction time by 1.2 seconds. If I were your enemy, I would start there. Luca slammed his hand on the table, but not in anger. He turned to Marco. Check the north garden cameras. Now. Suddenly, the lights flickered and died. The room plunged into total darkness. Stay down, Luca roared. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a sleek black pistol. He moved with the speed of a predator, stepping in front of Valentina and Zion. The red emergency lights kicked in, casting a bloody glow over the room. A high-pitched alarm began to scream. They are here, Zion said. He wasn't crying. He wasn't shaking. He was looking at the keypad on the wall. They didn't break the gates, Mom. They hacked the server. That's why the lights went out first. Luca, we have to get out. Valentina grabbed Zion's hand. The safe room is blocked, Marco shouted over the alarm. His radio buzzing with static. They've jammed the electronic locks. We're trapped in the dining hall. Luca looked at the heavy steel doors. They were designed to keep people out, but now they were keeping them in. He looked at his son. For the first time, the Mafia Boss looked desperate. Zion, Luca said, his voice low. You said you noticed a pattern. Is there another way out? Zion stood up on his chair. He looked at the ventilation grate high on the wall. The air ducts connect to the old kitchen, but the fan is moving too fast. If we don't stop the blades, we can't get through. I can't stop a giant fan with a gun, Zion. Luca growled as the sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. You don't need a gun, Zion said, pointing to the silver coin Luca had given him at the hospital. You need physics. The sound of heavy boots reached the door. Someone was trying to break the lock from the outside. Marco, hold the door, Luca commanded. He turned back to Zion. Explain. Fast. Zion pointed to the control box near the vent. The fan is controlled by a frequency. If you short-circuit the magnetic lock on the door using the wires from that keypad, the power surge will trip the breaker for the entire wing. The fan will stop. That's too risky, Valentina cried. You could get shocked. It's a 12-volt system, Mom. It will just tingle, Zion said calmly. Luca didn't hesitate. He smashed the keypad open with the butt of his gun. Which wires, Zion? Blue and yellow, the boy said. Touch them to the metal frame. Now. Luca grabbed the wires. Bark. A blue flash lit up the room. Luca grunted as the current hit him, but he didn't let go. Clunk. The sound of the massive ventilation fan slowing down filled the room. The screaming alarm went silent. Everything was deathly quiet. Go. Up. Luca lifted Zion toward the vent. He threw the boy inside, then helped Valentina up. Just as Luca was pulling himself into the dark tunnel, the dining room doors exploded inward. Men in masks flooded the room, their rifles raised. "They're gone!" one of the attackers shouted, looking at the empty table. Inside the narrow, dusty air duct, the three of them crawled in silence. Luca was in the back. His gun pointed toward the opening they had just left. They reached the old kitchen and dropped down onto the cold tile floor. The SUV was waiting in the back alley, engines purring. As they sped away from the estate, leaving the chaos behind, Luca looked at his son. Zion was ruffling his own hair, trying to get the dust out. He looked perfectly normal. "You saved us," Luca said. It was the first time he had ever said those words to anyone. Zion looked at the golden trophy sitting on the floor of the car. "I didn't save you. I just used the available data to find the most logical exit." Luca leaned back, a dark, dangerous smile crossing his face. He looked at Valentina. "My father was right," Luca whispered. "He is a Moretti. And the people who attacked my home just made a very big mistake." "What mistake?" Valentina asked, her voice trembling. Luca looked at Zion, who was already sketching a new security pattern in his notebook. "They thought they were attacking a mafia boss," Luca said. "But they just started a war with a scientist. And Zion never loses an argument." The car sped into the night, heading toward a secret location. The secret beach house was the opposite of the stone fortress. There were no gray walls or heavy gates. Here, the air smelled of salt and the only sound was the crashing of the waves. It had been 3 weeks since the attack. Luca's men had handled the threat, but Luca had done something even more surprising. He had stepped away from the city. He had realized that being a leader wasn't about being feared. It was about protecting what mattered. Valentina sat on the porch, watching the sun dip toward the ocean. She looked at peace for the first time in 5 years. "Mom, look at the trajectory," Zion shouted from the sand. He was standing by the water with a small wooden boat he had built. Luca was kneeling in the sand next to him. His expensive suit trousers rolled up to his knees. The powerful Mafia Boss was covered in sand and sea salt. "If the wind speed remains at 10 knots, Zion explained, pointing to his notebook, "the boat should reach that rock in exactly 45 seconds. Luca checked his watch. The one Zion had noticed was tired weeks ago. "I think your math is slightly off, Zion. You didn't account for the tide." Zion frowned, recalculating. "You're right. The tide is a variable I missed. Adjusting now." Luca laughed. It was a real warm sound. He stood up and looked back at Valentina. He gave her a small nod, a silent promise that the danger was truly over. He had spent his whole life building an empire of stone, but he had found his real strength in a 5-year-old scientist and a woman who never gave up. Luca walked up to the porch and sat next to Valentina. He pulled an envelope from his pocket. It wasn't a DNA report or a legal document. "What is that?" Valentina asked. "A gift for Zion," Luca said. "I bought the old research building downtown. I'm turning it into a private school for gifted children. Zion will be the first student. And," he paused, looking at her, "I've put the property in your name. You'll be the director." Valentina's eyes filled with tears. "Luca, you didn't have to do that." "Logic, Valentina," Luca said, using Zion's favorite word. "The most logical way to keep him safe is to give him a future where he doesn't have to fight. I want him to use his brain for science, not for survival." Zion ran up the stairs, holding his boat. He looked at his parents sitting together. He didn't say anything, but he noticed the way Luca's hand was resting near Valentina's. He noticed the way the tension had left his mother's shoulders. The boat reached the rock, Zion said, his eyes bright. My revised hypothesis was 100% correct. Luca stood up and ruffled the boy's hair. Good. Because I have a new hypothesis for you to test. What is it? Zion asked, tilting his head. I hypothesize that if we go to the kitchen right now, Luca said with a grin, there is a 99.9% probability of fine chocolate cake. Zion's face lit up with a rare, huge smile. That is a fact-based statement I can support. As they walked into the house together, the sun finally set. The shadows were gone. For the first time, the Moretti family wasn't defined by blood or business. They were defined by love. And for Zion the scientist, that was the most perfect answer of all.